Kelly, so you're fighting on this in a different way. You're also worried about the family, the schools, our children, all of it. Tell us about what this fight and this coalition you put together.
Absolutely, Steve. As you know, there's been a war on parents, and we've seen a lot of that in the school boards. What we haven't seen a lot of is what's happened from Washington, D.C. on down and what the National School Board Association did. So I've put together a coalition of parenting group leaders, parents, constitutional attorneys, public figures. This National School Board Association memo, which was written on September 29th, 2021, precipitated the October 4th Merrick Garland memo designating parents as domestic terrorists. I found FOIA'd emails that showed that within the NSBA, they said this was inappropriate, that communication issues plague the NSBA. 14 attorneys general sent a letter after the Merrick Garland memo calling this NSBA memo a massive fraud against the American people. And while they backtracked on it, there are people who've gone to prison, they've been fined, they've been harassed. In my research, I've discovered where this all started. We need to go back to the fraudulent premise, which caused so much suffering and persecution of parents and families.
Kelly, thank you for joining us. We're going to cover this one closely. So thank you for being on here today to kick it off.
Steve, thanks for being a fighter and allowing me to come on today, because I'm a fighter too, and we got to take back our country.
Thanks, brother.
Why would you be arrested for speaking?
The federal government has been persecuting me and my family for about 4 years. We moved out to Tucson from Bend, Oregon in 2017, in part to get away from the left. We ended up opening a small family coffee shop. The lockdown started. We were targeted by Pima County. We started getting threats, people calling the shop. We didn't know what was going on, and some customers started sending me screenshots and said, "You're on the Pima County Wall of Shame." Well, what is that? It's a website that Pima County had made to list supposedly non-compliant businesses, and they had set up this program. It became this nightmare. So one of the Pima County Board of Supervisors invited me to one of the meetings because I had emailed and said, "Hey, you've wrongly listed us as non-compliant. It's caused my family to have death threats against us." So I went to this board meeting. My wife and kids have to wake up and read these foul comments, so I just started reading them. Everyone knew I wasn't directing these at the board, but they treated it as if I was disorderly simply for reading comments that were on our own social media. Within 30 seconds of speaking, I was surrounded by sheriff's officers. I was handcuffed, and I was let out of the room, and I was arrested for disorderly conduct for speaking. We came to find out later that the chair of the board had actually been the one who made the so-called complaint, had never been to our shop. They wanted to choose a target to assert their authority, and they found that there was somebody who was actually going to come confront them. No, you're going to hear this because your health department made us hear this.
Mr. Walker?
You're going to hear this.
Mr. Walker, if
What?
you don't watch your language, I'm going to have you escorted out of the room.
Your health department threw us under the
Sir,
bus,
I'm
and the
asking
constant
you-
barrage of this kind of language
Sergeant Arms,
has been sent.
please escort this man out of the hearing room.
No, your health department threw us to the rage
Sir?
mob.
I've asked you to behave and to...
I have a right to speak.
Okay.
I have a right to speak.
Let go of the podium.
I'll censor the language, but you need to understand that my family has been submitted to threats. My family has been submitted to threats because of you. Death threats on my staff. You are violating my civil rights.
You are resisting.
I'm not resisting. I'm just strong.
My wife didn't want my kids to play out in the front yard because we had people threatening to kill my children. And when I went to that Board of Supervisors meeting, after they had framed our business, I went there like a lion because they'd forgotten they work for us, we don't work for them. And I'd never been arrested before. I had no idea I was going to be handcuffed. It was wrong. And they knew they set us up. We had passed our silly COVID inspection, and I was sitting back in the booking room with this sheriff's officer, hands behind my back, and he said, I'm in so much trouble with my wife because we're patriots. And I said, then why did you do that? He said, I didn't want to lose my job. I said, your job is to protect people like me from people like that.
Good evening to you. This standoff between the county health department and Viva Coffee House over the mask policy appears to have taken a break. Remember, the county forced the business to shut down for failing to comply with the policy, a battle that gained attention across southern Arizona. But KOLD News 13's Bud Foster reports the hardball tactics appear to be over, at least for now.
Yes, we're open again. We were closed for 3 days.
Viva Coffee House was closed for 3 days last week by the county health department for violating the mask policy.
Hey, you've wrongly listed us as non-compliant. Our coffee shop down in Tucson was framed as being non-compliant, publicly listed as such, when actually we had passed the inspections. We never failed an inspection.
The only business in the county to face closure for non-compliance. The only business in the county to face closure for...
I think it was portrayed that we were actively opposing the rules, and I don't feel that's a fair characterization.
Although the coffee house has posted signs calling masks nonsense and suggested being forced to wear them is a form of tyranny. The county also released more than a dozen complaints against the coffee house for allowing customers and clerks to work behind the counter without a mask.
We're in a difficult position as a business because we definitely want to follow what the county asks, but we also don't want to run afoul of people's civil rights.
The mask policy has been political from day one, a policy which has adherents and opponents. Walker was handcuffed and arrested at a supervisor's meeting last month for using profanity and creating a disturbance over the mask policy.
Everyone knew I wasn't directing these at the board, but they treated it as if I was disorderly simply for reading comments that were on our own social media.
There have also been several visits from the health department, which observed several violations. That led to a threat of a $1,000 fine and a $10,000 fine for each offense. But now it seems those hardball tactics by the county have won the day. Enforced compliance. I'm in charge. With a mask policy here. As of yesterday, according to the county health department, the coffee house has come into compliance, sporting a new ready-for-use sign.
The positive note is that we understand now what they want. That's a win for everybody.
Still, the sign alerting customers to the fact they must wear a mask when entering is less than prominently displayed, unless, of course, you're a dog. I'm Bud Foster, KYLD, News 13.
American citizens like Kelly Walker are being framed for crimes that they did not commit because some pencil-necked political operative claiming to be a journalist said so. Kelly Walker is a brave individual and a hero, and he's here with us now. Kelly, thank you so much for coming. We appreciate you being here.
Stu, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I mean, this is a government persecution at the hands of the media. I mean, people really need to start thinking about this. This is an obvious power grab. This is obviously an attempt to lock everybody into physical, virtual, digital, and financial prison camps and rule over you.
We're fighting back. We don't have to take this as Americans. We're Americans. We don't tolerate tyranny.
Amen.
A year later, I was arrested again for speaking. And actually, that second arrest is what's most relevant right now. I got a frantic call from a father. He said that his son was being quarantined. They forced him to wear a mask. He threw it in the nurse's trash, and they made him dig it out of the trash. He said, "Would you come here and witness this? Help me keep calm and help me figure out what to do." I actually called another father. I thought, let's have a couple of witnesses. Now, this is where things get interesting because we were set up. Media worldwide portrayed this incident as 3 large men stormed a school, tried to arrest and kidnap and zip tie a principal. The police were called and they fled. And if you go to my website, you'll see actually what happened, which is nothing of the sort. 3 fathers got arrested for sitting in a school office having a conversation. The main judge in Tucson, he said, "You guys didn't stand up. You didn't take a threatening step toward anyone. All you did was disagree." And then he turned to the school district and said, "You don't get to tell them how they disagree." You look like you might have a question.
I'm just so fascinated that the wickedness of this. Americans need to wake up. This is so unacceptable. It is evil. And when you have actors like this, when you have people like this behaving like this, if you do not push back, if you do not do something, you're guilty. And I thank God for you, Kelly Walker, standing up. I hope folks will go to givesendgo.com/freedomtalk, givesendgo.com/freedomtalk. We'll be right back.
Story that the school district put out was that 3 radicalized violent men stormed a school uninvited, attempted to arrest and zip tie principal, fled when the police came. 3 days later, 5 police officers showed up at my house to give me a paper ticket for misdemeanor 3 trespassing. And by the time this went to court, they had tacked on a bunch of other misdemeanors. Everyone I've showed the video to has watched it and said, "You guys didn't do anything wrong." There was a history with the school district. We had a large number of parents coming to the meetings saying, "Look, because you're force masking kids, because you're quarantining and isolating kids are committing suicide." Parents came forward with grave concerns about the mental health of their children due to these COVID policies and the lockdowns and the forced masking and all the rest.
We now need suicide hotlines printed on the back of our ID cards.
The entire community had this crisis. We had people coming to our coffee shop saying, look, kids were committing suicide, and we have the stats. And instead of sitting down with the community and the parents and saying, hey, how can we resolve this? They portrayed the parents as radical, and DOJ and the FBI ended up sending that memo around that supposedly parents are domestic terrorists for disagreeing. What we were trying to do here was stand our ground and peacefully protest, but also show them that this can't continue. And there wasn't any disruption to classrooms or learning at Mesquite yesterday. So we were in the office having a parent administration meeting. Here's a headline they posted about me. An anti-masker just tried to zip tie a school principal of COVID rules. His kids don't even go to her school. This was a hearing on an order of protection against one of the fathers. So the three of us fathers, they put out this story that we attempted to zip tie and arrest a principal. Listen to what the judge says, because we had the whole thing on video. He watched the video, and this was his analysis.
I listened to the tape, and a couple things I noticed. One, defendant never raised his voice. I listened to the whole tape. He never stood up, which I found very significant, because you're right. His size would be intimidating if he stood up and got in your face, but he didn't. He sat down the whole time. That was one thing I was looking for, is what steps he did. I mean, what he did is he disagreed with you. That's not disorderly conduct. That's not rude. That's not threatening. You guys don't get to define how people disagree with you. School districts don't have that right. The citizens have that right. I'm dismissing your order.
So what was the story with the zip ties? You brought zip ties?
Vice News sucks, by the way. We just got a call from Dad. He was distraught. He said they've abused my child. They're refusing to let him go. We didn't know what we were facing. We didn't know would there be unruly people there. Going in, one of the guys took him and said, no, we're not going to need these. You know, we kind of figured out what was going on. So he just held them. We all sat and talked. They never came up. They never said, what are those? You know, what they did is they went afterwards and looked at the video and tried to make a big deal of it. But, you know, my lawyer in court asked, did Mr. Walker get up? Did he take a step toward you? Did he do this? Did he do that? They said, no. And then the city prosecutor gets up and he says, well, did you feel like this could have happened? Do you feel like that could have happened?
Oh, my God.
I didn't even have the things in my possession. And the dad who actually had them in his possession got let off with a plea deal and a $250 fine. They sentenced me to 100 days in jail and a $10,000 fine. And then they proceeded to steal.
Well, wait a minute. I thought that he was just saying how you didn't do any of these things.
He did, but I had a different judge who, by the way, you go and you look at Tucson.com and there's an article where the Magistrate Commission unanimously recommended against reappointing her. They said she doesn't offer due process. She's abusive to defendants. Out of the three dads, all I did was sit there. In fact, I called a sheriff's lieutenant to try to get advice. I called a state senator to get advice. And the whole thing was just ridiculous. All over the world, media has my picture out there saying that I attempted to zip tie a principal. Nothing of the sort happened. I'm literally just sitting there talking. But
wait, so why did the judge throw the book at you? On what basis?
No basis. You're a large, scary man is what it came down to. And at first it was misdemeanor 3 trespassing. They show up on my house on a Sunday night, 3 days after it happens, deliver this piece of paper to me, and then they start stacking other things up on disorderly conduct, disrupting an educational institution. And by the way, in court, we had an email from the superintendent of schools, John Carruth, who's a punk. The day after, he emailed all of the staff and he said the situation was resolved peacefully and the educational setting was not disturbed. We had that. The judge waived to decide, and I still got charged with disrupting an educational
She
institution.
waived to decide? What do you mean?
She wouldn't admit it as evidence.
What?
Yeah, it was that bad. And so we sold our home in Tucson. We found out as we were closing that they had put a judgment lien on our house for almost $10,000. And we had to get a lawyer, and they said, look, we have this Homestead Act in Arizona that says unless they make $250,000 or more on their home sale, you don't get to put a lien on the house for any reason, including a judgment. And they said, well, we don't consider that his homestead. What, the house where we lived, the house we bought, the house where we had our family and backyard chickens. So they've still got that $10,000. We're $3,000 into a lawyer trying to get it back. I mean, literally, this is how corrupt these people are.
I'm in charge, and you're going to sign your ticket, or you're going to go to jail.
Because they went out to the media the very next day, spun this false story. This is what we got. Letters mailed to my home. We're going to zip tie your wife, rape her in front of you, kill your kids in front of you. My picture was posted all over town by some idiot. So the FBI was investigating us for misdemeanor 3 trespassing. But do you think they investigated this? Hell no. They didn't care.
The federal government targeted innocent parents who were trying to be advocates for their children.
September 29th, 2021, the National School Board Association sent a letter to Joe Biden asking for federal assistance dedicated to these dangerous parents, and this whole domestic terrorist narrative came about. By October 4th, Merrick Garland issued the memo designating parents as domestic terrorists. Then October 18th, there was a letter by 14 attorneys general sent to Garland and Biden citing this National School Board Association letter as a massive fraud. 1 week ago in a letter dated October 18th, 2021, my fellow attorneys general and I laid out the facts surrounding the massive fraud that the National School Board Association has perpetrated on the American people. In a letter to the Department of Justice, NSBA accused parents throughout the United States of, quote, domestic terrorism and hate crimes, warranting the invocation of the Patriot Act in regards to domestic terrorism.
We've never seen it in our lifetimes. Until the nonsense of COVID and the masking and the mandates started to happen, nobody had ever seen anything like this in our lifetimes. We would never dream that mayors and governors could be so wicked, that school boards could be so wicked. Really, the ugly underbelly of our fellow Americans, we saw it, and it's hideous.
They're going after parents in this country. And see, think about it. Illegals get more precedence than the American people do, than the American family. To talk about this is Kelly John Walker. He's an American statesman, senior writer, and he's an entrepreneur. He's the founder of RealFreedomTalk.com, host of Freedom Talk TV, and a freelance writer, publisher in the Washington Times, Gateway Pundit, the Epoch Times, George Magazine, Andrew Magazine, Newsmax, Townhall, Law Enforcement Today, and much more. His newest project is The Fathering in a World Gone Mad. Kelly, thank you so much for joining me. My goodness. So, with all of this illegals happening, see, they don't see the terrorists coming across the southern border as a problem, but they see people like you as a problem that want to stand up for your children. What is that?
Yeah, and until recently, we lived on the border, and I still have people in Border Patrol and other law enforcement agencies updating me on what's going on. We've been fighting on a number of fronts, but one of those definitely has been the school issues, starting with forced masking, vaccinations, the way they created a two-class culture with children who didn't want to mask or had different beliefs. And these school districts were being paid big money by the CDC to keep forcing these masks on kids. So you can go to realfreedomtalk.com and see more of my story. But to make a long story short, I was arrested on September 15th of 2020 because our coffee shop down in Tucson was framed as being non-compliant, publicly listed as such, when actually we had passed the inspections. We never failed an inspection. That was the first point where I started to be targeted by our own government. Just shy of a year later, on September 2nd, 2021, I was arrested again with two fathers who were sitting in an office disagreeing with the principal because she and her staff had not only forced this other father's, I think he was a 7-year-old kid, to wear a mask, but he took it off his face, threw it in the trash. They made him fish it out of the trash with all the other dirty masks and put it back on his face. So the dad who was there that we came to support, he called the police, the Tucson police, and said, they've abused my child. I want you to come here and arrest them. The police said, it's too controversial. We're not coming out. I called a sheriff's lieutenant. Then I called then State Senator Kelly Townsend, got advice for the dad. Senator Townsend said, have him get it in writing why they're quarantining his kid for the third time, which means 30 days total of missed school. And then probably, you should leave, which we did. The way the media portrayed it, and John Carruth, who's the superintendent of schools, and this principal, they flat out went out and lied. And the story they concocted was that 3 large dads stormed a school, attempted to arrest and handcuffed a principal. The police were called and they fled. Now, if that had happened, we would have been charged with felonies. As it was, 3 days later, 5 police officers came to my house to deliver a paper ticket for misdemeanor 3 trespassing, which is literally somewhere between a parking ticket and loitering. But then they began to stack on other misdemeanors, and I ended up in a 3-day trial, which was absolutely ridiculous. Right here, you're seeing this happened between the arrests, an April 27th school board meeting that originated in our coffee shop with a meeting the day before. I was the first one in to that meeting, and literally I'm saying, excuse me, as I'm going by this man. You can see he's not even looking at me. He's not trying to stop me. They had designated a side room with video monitors for us dirty anti-maskers, but over 200 parents showed up to that school board meeting to just simply to communicate to the school board meeting, hey, your policies, your COVID policies, they're leading to youth suicides. We had a 17-year-old boy who gave me his speech and wanted to tell them why his friend jumped off the bleachers at the very high school where the school board was meeting, and they wouldn't let these people in. We finally just stood our ground and said, you are going to let these people in. They have a right to speak. I wrote that article for George Magazine. I was looking through some FOIA emails, and it turns out that the National School Board Association, one of those members in a discussion among them, actually named me specifically. So I was the first one into the first school board meeting that went viral, and the first parent to be targeted was a papa bear. I love the mama bears, I really do, but I think that's significant because men should be leading. They should be protecting their families. So the full weight of the federal government came down on us. We're not going to be able to get into a house for a while because of the money they stole. I have a false conviction. There's a warrant for my arrest in Tucson. They ought to be arresting those other people because I have the full video on realfreedomtalk.com. You can see every minute of what happened. You can see that they lied about it.
Let's split screen this one here. Tell us about this really quick. Because, man, they're going after you, trying to set you as an example, but they're doing this to many Americans across the country.
Yeah, they are. They are. And Vail, Arizona Superintendent John Carruth, I found out before that first school meeting ever happened, he contacted the sheriff's lieutenant in that area and wanted them to profile and target me. His response was, this isn't the Soviet Union. So they were tracking me, targeting me. The FBI was investigating me. Meanwhile, we're getting death threats, like in our home mail, threats to kill my wife and family. FBI didn't do jack. Tucson police didn't do anything. But here's how we're fighting back. This past summer, I wrote a letter to a number of congressmen. A very prominent congressman, who I'm not going to name yet, got back to me immediately. One of his staffers got back, said, this congressman has appointed 3 of us to investigate this. So they have been investigated since July 7th, which they're going to find out really soon. There are several of us, including parenting group advocates, attorneys. I'm talking, one of these attorneys is very high level. We're going to meet with them in Washington, D.C., and this is very, very likely going to go before a committee because they can apologize to the government. But I know a school mom who was put in prison for 5 days simply because she wouldn't leave the school until they gave her that written reason why they were quarantining her healthy daughter. They even handcuffed her 16-year-old daughter.
Main takeaway from your story is that this could happen to anybody at any time. So with this, I suppose, do you think it was designed to intimidate parents and people like you from, not standing up against what you see to be clearly something that's happening that's obviously wrong?
Absolutely. The judge even mentioned in our sentencing that she was making an example of us to dissuade other parents from doing what we did. She also is holding us accountable in our sentencing for mean things that strangers said to the principal, which totally outside of our control. I mean, we had people say mean things to us. So the whole thing is just kind of ridiculous. We're being our sentence harsher because of things that were outside of our control, the things that we didn't do, to be set an example of, not for the crime, but for political reasons.
Yes, I think that's completely accurate. As you said, it's a Class 3 misdemeanor is similar to a traffic fine, and you're not going to be dragged through the court system for 8 months and be sent to jail for something like that if it wasn't to pull you up and say, look, here's what's happened to you. Here's what's happened to Jennifer.
Hi everybody, we're here with Jennifer Mahuda and friends, and this is hard for everybody. I'm a wreck right now. I can't imagine how Jennifer feels. She's going into jail for 5 days. Because she stood up for her daughter, because she stood up for her family. And we had a school shooting in Uvalde where the police held parents back, didn't go in, handcuffed a mother. Something's backwards, something's really wrong when this kind of thing's happening, because the schools work for parents, not vice versa. And I want to say Jennifer's very, very brave to be doing this, and we're going to work hard to get more attention for this, because this should be national news. This should be an outrage. But Jennifer's just very brave to do this. I know she's not intimidated. They think this is going to be tough on her, but she's tougher than they are. I'm so proud of her. I mean, this stuff is egregious, and our family has taken so many hits. There are times we've been near despair because it's been really difficult, but we've refused to give up. I told my wife, what's left of our home equity money, we're going to lose it in this fight. It's going to indefinitely put off our ability to get back into a house. And my wife, without even thinking about it, said, this is more important.
You know what?
We are in this to go the distance.
You know what? This is infuriating. It's absolutely infuriating because we have terrorists coming across the southern border. We have illegals coming across the southern border, and they're giving them all kind of assistance. They're giving them money. They're giving them health care. They're giving them housing. But us, parents, American citizens, they're trying to crush all of us, trying to destroy all of us. This is the most disgusting thing ever. Yeah. Kelly, thank you so much.
My wife recently flew back to another state to help one of these J6 parents who was targeted. And if this person goes to prison, we're going to take care of their kids for them. We're doing everything we can. We appreciate all the help. You know, we are fighting for every American, not just ourselves. And in the beginning, after that first arrest, we had a lawyer propose a $2 million settlement to the county, but it came with a gag order. And we said, no, we turned down $2 million so we could keep talking and keep fighting. It's not about the money. It's about our country, and we're losing it. But people like you and me, we're standing up on the front lines, and we're not going to back down.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've always said, since I've been doing what I'm doing, it's not about the money. We need money, but it's not about the money. It's about our country.
We have been telling the school district for months and months that we have a mental health crisis. In our neighborhood, a 13-year-old boy walked out in the desert near our home and blew his brains out. The moment you react, you're vilified, you're demonized. And I'll tell you something, we, a little coffee shop, we had people coming to us saying, our kids are committing suicide because of these policies, because they're being isolated and ostracized, because in some cases they can't medically wear a mask.
I've suffered from migraines, but ever since I've been wearing a mask, it started to happen more often.
Many students are mentally challenged, and they panic when they wear one, and sometimes they even slobber, and which causes the mask to mold, and this can cause many diseases from that, like strep throat. Personally, I have chronic acne, and I have to wear medication on my face, and when I wear a mask, the medication tends to melt, and it runs into my nose and mouth, and I've tried to talk to teachers about me not wearing one, and they just tell me it's policy and I have to wear one no matter what.
Then people come to me and say, I'm deaf or hearing impaired. I'm depressed because now my world is completely silent. I've had people come and say, I was abused and raped and a hand held over my face and I can't tolerate something on my face. That's what happened at Micah Mountain. A boy jumped off the top of the bleachers and killed himself. A boy had a speech that he wanted to give about his classmate and tell them what they're doing. And he was denied the ability to speak because they shut down that meeting, and then they portrayed us as violent and hostile. Over 200 parents came to speak, to say, you are hurting our children. No child has died of COVID in this county, and somehow we're the bad guys.
What will you cling to now? Is it your pride, the money, or the control? Vail is still a small community, even though we're well known now thanks to all of you. I think you should ask yourselves if this is really the proverbial hill you want your names and reputations to die on. Speaking of reputations, I, along with 62,000 plus Vail residents, received this free magazine, Vail Style. For those of you that throw it out with your junk mail, it's an advertisement magazine. Nearly everything in it is a form of paid advertisement, even if it's made to look like journalism. This month, there was part one of an interview, if you can call it that, with John Carruth. The soft pitch interview that was done by one of the owners of the magazine, and it left me wondering, Mr. Carruth, was that a paid for interview, or was that in trade so that you could improve your image among 62,000 plus and magazine in turn? Regardless, I find the people in this room, the letters to the editor, and the op-ed in the Vail Voice from this month much more telling of how many people think of you in this community. It's time to end mandatory masking and the mitigation policies. Rightly returning parents of choice to decide what's best medically for their children.
Next time.
We've told the school districts, we've told John Carruth, we've reported these stories, we've done Freedom Talk videos from a family whose child was put on suicide watch.
And I said no, I would not have a mask on. And they got Mr. Donaldson. He came out and talked to us, and he said that he did not care that he was breaking the law. We have a policy, go follow the law too. And I was severely mad. I just wanted to walk in there and take school because I felt my education is more than a policy. A stupid policy to wear a stupid cloth over my face so I can have anxiety and lose a social life. Because students should not be able to go through this. This is wrong. You are hurting everyone. I don't care if your parents say that this is good for you. You know deep down inside you are wrong and they are wrong. You should fight.
Let me tell you something. No mother should ever have to put their child on suicide watch. I had to do that for this young man. Every night I went in and I went into his room, not to say just I love you and I care about you and I hope you make it to tomorrow, but to go, I'm afraid for you. That should not happen in this community. This should not happen in society in general. As our children's mental health is struggling and deteriorating.
You know some of the profane responses I got? Oh, they're a bunch of redneck Trump supporters.
Come on now.
We did not try to arrest a principal. We went to protect a child who had been forced to take a mask out of the garbage and put it on his face and was quarantined with no test and no reason for the third time. What we did is we called the police.
If they don't comply with the law, we're going to call the sheriff and ask for them to be arrested. We're just coming in to talk first.
And we wanted to report child abuse. And the police said, you're right, they are breaking the law, but we're not going to come out as too controversial. And this is on a principle. People come to me and they said she's locked kids in closets and forgot about them. Story after story. I had a sheriff's lieutenant come and say, I remember that. And he's gotten in touch with his school resource officer who is now in Texas. And I wrote about that as part of my job. The massive increase in domestic abuse, suicide, all of these things is because of how this has been mismanaged. A pandemic has never, ever been managed like this before. And that's the tragedy. And that's where the school boards need to pay attention and listen. Because they have driven some parents to the point of desperation. Because when your kids are put on suicide watch and nobody will change, and you go because people have gone to school board meeting after school board meeting, including kids saying, you've got to have some balance in this. And they look at you with no expression on their faces. That's tyranny.
I'm wondering why I'm here again. I shouldn't be here again. Why do I have to re-speak myself? That just tells me that you weren't listening the first time. So I'm going to read once again, because you don't decide to listen. Are you listening? That's a question.
I understand.
Thank you. I'm going to start off with students' mental health. Now, we felt depressed, sad, upset because we don't have social life or peer support. That's wrong. You are trying to control us with a tool. Instead of adding counseling, why don't you just remove the tool or make it optional to use that tool? Because counseling's not going to do anything for me, nor any of the other students, because we already have counselors. And if those counselors haven't talked to us, then they should be fired. And that's wrong. They should hear the students out and try to get it to you. Now, peer support is very important, because if we don't have that, we're depressed and suicides happen. And that is wrong. Do you like death? Do you like dying? Or do you like having kids die? Because that is what you're doing, and that is wrong. And you already know that. And yet you still decide to do it. I don't know why you still decide to do it. That's your choice. Now, I say that policy is not over law. Law states that we and our parents have a choice to do what we want in our education. So why are we having a policy trump that law? That law is very important, and it is set in stone, in paper. So why is a policy that you made up in 1 year controlling everything? That is wrong. This is why we are trying to kick you out, so we have someone to actually listen to us, not you.
We've had to endure some people gossiping locally, thinking that me, a father of five, a guy who served a year as a volunteer teacher in Sri Lanka, would actually go and do something so foul. No, we didn't go to harass innocent school staff. We went to protect our children, and we have a duty to do that.
This started a chain of persecution by Pima County, by the city, by others, and even by the FBI. Yes, I have been watched and monitored by the FBI. They've been in my business before. So their intent now is to intimidate me, to shut me up, so that I won't share how these policies enforced by the school districts, which, by the way, they were paid for to uphold, led to youth suicides. Not one child in our county died of COVID. About 6, I believe, kids committed suicide. I'm looking up that number right now. So we had this decision, and some people said, man, you should move away. You're up against great odds. They have more power and resources. Parents came forward with grave concerns about the mental health of their children due to these COVID policies and the lockdowns and the forced masking and all the rest. We're going to reveal that. And there are going to be some nationwide articles, documentaries, and people are going to be held accountable. It's so important. I know everybody's tired, but we've got to keep fighting, because if we let these people get away with what they did, they'll do it again. This is Joshua Phillip from Crossroads. He's working on sharing some of this story.
Call with a parent out in Arizona who's being targeted right now. He was telling me that basically, he's being targeted by the FBI over, of course, this whole school boards thing. And he was saying that, they've had some serious stuff. The stuff parents are dealing with is insane. Parents are dealing with not only the transgender movement being pushed on their kids to the extent that the schools are even trying to hide information from parents, giving instructions to children as they tell children that they can make life-altering decisions such as chemically castrating themselves or physically castrating themselves, irreversible processes, things that will force them to conduct regular medical procedures on themselves for the rest of their lives, while not being properly told that what that actually means and the consequences of it, and while being told to not tell your parents they're being told this stuff.
It did come up in court that the FBI has been watching little old me. I'm not dangerous at all. I have no history of violence. I have no criminal record.
Go ahead. Drew is 7 years old and in first grade at Mesquite, and he'd like to talk about how he feels about social distancing, hand sanitizer, masks, and vaccines. Thank you, Drew.
So, I don't like vaccines. I think they're unhealthy.
What happened the day that we went to school without a mask on? What did they do that day?
They made us do the waiting game.
What else happened?
Then we leave.
They wouldn't let you in the classroom, right? They took all the other kids out. They made them go to the art room and segregated you?
Yeah.
Yeah, what else happened? How do you feel when you wear a mask? Do you get headaches?
Yes, I get headaches.
What else?
It makes me thirsty a lot.
What happens when second grade starts? What do you want to see happen?
No masks there.
And what else? You don't want to be thought of as differently from your friends, right? You don't want to be treated differently than the rest of the people in your class, like you have been, right?
Yeah.
What else? Anything else you want to say? Okay, we would like to attend second grade, but what you vote on tonight depends on whether or not we do that. Thank you.
Our rights are inherent. As John Locke said, they're natural rights. As our declaration says, we consider these rights to be self-evident. They are things that we are born with. And we need to have a clear line that the government cannot go past, because we don't ask them for our rights. If necessary, we fight for our rights.